So I've been obsessed with making granny squares over the past few months because they're just so fun and easy to make. You typically have to make a bunch of squares and then stitch them together using a plastic needle or a crochet hook. Luckily for this tutorial, you only need to make 5 squares. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Lewa Baby. I'm going to be showing you how I make my granny square hats. All of the yarn that I use are weight 4 medium acrylic yarns, and I use a 5.5mm crochet hook. After finding the center pole, I start by making a slip knot and I chain 4. Next, I insert my hook into the first chain that I created and I make a slip stitch. To start the first round, I chain 2 and I double crochet 2 into the center of the chain 4. Then I chain 1 and double crochet 3 into the center of the chain 4. I'm going to repeat this sequence for a total of 3 times. After my last double crochet, I'm going to chain 1, insert my hook into the chain 2 and slip stitch to end round 1. To start the second round, I'm going to chain 2 and double crochet 2 into the same corner space. So you want to be mindful here of the fact that the corner space is actually not a stitch, but it's the gap created by the chain 1s you made. This is going to be half of the first corner in your granny square. And now I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into that next gap. So here we're actually going to complete the first corner by chaining 2 and then placing another 3 double crochet into that same corner space. Now I'm going to repeat that same sequence 2 more times to complete the third and the fourth corners. After completing the third and the fourth corner, you should be back at the start of round 2. Now you're going to chain 1 and place 3 double crochets into that same corner you started with. This is how we're going to complete the other half of this corner. Now I'm going to chain 2 and insert my hook into the starting chain 2 and slip stitch to end row 2. It's important to note that we're going to be working in these spaces in between the double crochets and not stitches. To start round 3, I'm going to chain 2 and then double crochet 2 in the same corner. Now that our square is getting bigger, we have more spaces other than the corners. So now I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into the first middle space gap. I'm back at one of the corner spaces now, so I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into that space, and then chain 2 and double crochet 3 into that space again to create a corner. I'm going to keep working around the granny square and repeating the same sequence of 3 double crochet in a middle space and a 3 double crochet, a chain 2, and another 3 double crochet in the corner spaces until I'm back at the start of my round. To end round 3, I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into that starting corner space. Now I'm going to chain 2, insert my hook into the first chain 2, and end round 3 with a slip stitch. We're going to start round 4 the same way by chaining 2 and then double crocheting 2 into the same corner space. Now the difference in round 4 is instead of having 1 middle space, there's going to be 2 middle spaces, but the same amount of corners. This pattern is honestly just a lot of repetition because you're building the square, and if you ideally wanted to make this hat maybe a little bigger, you could potentially add another round. We're only going to do 5 rounds in this tutorial, but if you wanted your hat bigger or maybe potentially a little smaller, you could stop after 4 rounds, or you could add an extra round and make it 6 rounds. I'm just going to continue repeating the same sequence along all 3 edges of the granny square hat until I'm back at the start of my round again. Now I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into the beginning corner space. Then I'm going to chain 2, insert my hook into the first chain 2 and slip stitch to end round 4. To change colors, you literally just pull in the new color as the first chain 1, starting your next round. Make sure to leave a little tail for each color so you can tuck them in at the end. I'm also going to tuck in both of my tails into the next 2 double crochets that I do, just for a little extra security. If you like, you could honestly change colors at the start of each round to make a more colorful granny square. You just have to be aware that it will require you to tuck in all the ends, and that could be a lot. So hopefully you get the gist of the granny square sequence when working around the piece now. For the 5th round, there will be 3 middle spaces where you're going to have to double crochet 3 with 1 chain 1 in between each double crochet 3. After that, you can cut your work, and I like to tuck in my ends as I work so it's not as time consuming in the end. Now that you know how to make a granny square, you're going to need to make 4 more granny squares for a total of 5. This next part is all about connecting the granny squares. I prefer to use slip stitches on the inside of the granny square hats to create a seamless look. I'm going to use 92 stitches back loop only to connect all 4 squares to the center. Then I'm going to create a slip knot and use 23 slip stitches back loop only to connect each of the sides. I'm going to be working these slip stitches into the back loops of the granny square pieces on what is going to be the inside of the granny square hat. So starting with the granny squares facing right side down, I'm going to pick up 2 of the squares and insert my hook into one of the chains at the corner spaces. I'm going to pull my slip knot through both back loops and create a slip stitch. It is very important to make sure that the stitches are lining up on both sides of each granny square. After connecting the first 2 squares, continuing with my working yarn, I'm going to pick up the next square and continue working to connect the 2 squares with 23 slip stitches. I'm going to continue working along the edge of the center granny square until I have all 4 granny squares connected to it. Once all 4 squares are connected to one, I'm going to start working on connecting each of the 4 sides. Continuing with my working yarn, I start to connect the sides of 2 granny squares using slip stitches. After connecting the first side, you're going to have to cut your yarn. To connect each of the 3 other sides, you're going to start by making a slip knot. Insert your hook back loop only into both sides of the granny square and pull through the slip knot. Now I'm going to use 23 slip stitches to connect these 2 sides of the granny square using back loop only. After the last slip stitch, I end my work and cut my yarn. I repeated the same sequence on the other 3 sides of the granny square hat. Your hat should be fully connected now, and you just have to tuck in your ends and cut your yarn. There are 2 ways to finish off your hat depending on the type of finish you'd like, and I'm going to show you both ways. The first method starts by creating a slip knot and inserting your hook into one of the corners of the granny square hat. Now I'm going to pull the slip knot through and chain 2. In that same corner space, I'm going to double crochet 2. Next, I'm going to chain 1 and double crochet 3 into the next space. Now I'm going to repeat this chain 1, double crochet 3 into the next gap until I'm back at the start. To end this round, I'm going to chain 1 and slip stitch into the beginning chain 2. Now I'm going to chain 1 and single crochet 95 around the edge of the granny square hat. I'm going to slip stitch into that chain 1 to end that round. I'm struggling a little, but I get it through eventually. There we go. And I end my work here and cut my yarn. The alternative way to finishing this hat is a lot simpler. It starts the same way by creating a slip knot and inserting it into any corner of the hat. And now you're just going to single crochet along the edge of the hat, but you're going to be using the back loop only. Then you're going to slip stitch to end your work and cut your yarn. This concludes the end of my granny square hat tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you now know how to make a granny square hat.